Billy and Susie, thank you again for chatting with me. I want to go back to the beginning of this story, this saga. It was September, I think, of 2015 when the authorities were called to a fire in the forest, right? Is that what kind of
Yeah.
started this? Take it from there. What happened? What did they discover?
So, what they discovered, they were called to a vegetation fire, and as they moved in, fighting the fire, as they moved in, they noticed that there was a structure, um, and then within that structure, as they started putting the fire out, they found what appeared to be remains, and so it kind of blew up from there. The fire captain um, the fire captain noticed the smell of burnt flesh or decomp, and that's when, from our understanding, that's when he called in El Dorado County sheriffs, and the detectives came in and started. Um, they just started going from there, taking it from there. It was they were burned so poor. They were burned so badly that there was really not much left of them. Um, and what had happened, what we were told by the DA, is that it was a phenomenon that happened when, as I'm sure you know, California burns every year. So at that time, there was a fire going on in Calaveras County, which was kind of just over a few mountains from them. And there was smoke in the air everywhere. It was and Lake County was on fire. There was just, how it gets. It was so smoky. And so when Nolan lit this cabin on fire, which was only about 600 square feet, when he lit the cabin on fire, supposedly what happened is that as the smoke and the heat rose with this canopy of outlying smoke, it couldn't go anywhere. So what happened was that it created this oven type effect,
Mm.
and then um, the cabin started collapsing into itself, and it collapsed into the foundation that was cinder block and created an oven in there. So they figure that he started the fire about 1:30, between 1:30 and 2, and it wasn't even the vegetation fire wasn't even seen until like 10:30 in the morning. So it burned
Oh, wow.
that long. It went a long, long time. So it was this crazy phenomenon of the heat couldn't get out, and it just created an oven, and it all just collapsed and incinerated them
Oh
to.
my gosh. But at the
So
time,
yes,
at the time, the authorities didn't know Nolan had started it, right?
correct. They did not know.
So
They
who
did
do you
not
know
know.
who called the 911?
There was no, somebody noticed the vegetation fire. I don't know who actually called. Someone noticed the smoke, the vegetation. It was like I said, it burned the cabin for so long, and then it just started lighting the vegetation on fire. Someone called it in to 911. So I don't.
It was one of the neighbors
Okay.
because the Molly and Adam's cabin was the last in the line on that row. So
Right.
it was one of the neighbors before theirs that noticed it, and that person made the call. I don't know which one it was, but I know it was one of those neighbors up there.
Was this a cabin that they would visit like on the weekends in the summer, or was this their permanent home?
It was a weekend cabin. The dream for them was to they wanted to be up there and be off the grid, kind of. Um, Supposedly that was the dream. And so it inside the cabin there were no. There was the structure, it was this little log cabin. There was the structure, but inside there were no. The walls were only framed, and so there was no sheetrock or anything. So it wasn't finished. It didn't have electricity. It didn't have gas, and it didn't have running water.
Okay.
But they would go up every week, and they were working the property around it. Um, and Adam was starting to get things in, because Adam was a contractor, and so they were starting to bring things in, but they hadn't run any. There were no real facilities. We had our motorhome down in what we called the meadow. That was down there um, for that whole summer, um, and we pulled it. They used it for facilities. So when we got it out of there the week before everything happened, um, yeah, poor Billy had to empty the tanks. So, um,
Some
Wasn't good.
many weekends worth of waste in there. So they are going up every weekend. They're working on refurbishing, finishing up the cabin. Did
yes.
something happen now looking back right before September 13th when this fire occurred that caused, what do we know about what caused Nolan to do what he did?
So what we know now, um, because I wrote you in the email that um, he had denied it up until we met with him on March 3rd.
Right.
Um,
So
so
let's hold that a little bit there, Susie, because I want to
yeah,
get to that. But what was his story, I guess, up until earlier this year?
up until earlier this year, his story was that he was, yes, they were fighting, and also let me just preface the whole thing by saying that there was abuse in the family home. Um, Adam was quite the narcissist. He was a great guy, but he was also quite the narcissist. And Nolan claimed lots of abuse. Nolan's claim was that Adam killed Molly and Gavin.
No,
I'm sorry.
first one, the first excuse he said is that he was never there.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
He didn't go up that weekend, which we knew was a lie.
And for so many reasons.
And then when that one didn't pan out, that lie didn't pan out, that's when he come up with the lie that uh, Adam killed Molly and Gavin, and he had to wrestle away the gun from his father and shot his father. And then
In self-defense.
in self-defense, and then got in the family truck and drove home.
Well, first, before he got in the family truck and drove home, he doused them all in the cabin with gasoline and lit it on fire, because he didn't want anyone to know what had happened. Because um, in in the Buchanan household, and we know this is the way Adam was. What happened in the family stayed in the family. You just
Mhm.
didn't tell anything. So that was his story at first. Um, you know,
And I guess I
his
should say there too, for people that aren't familiar, the police get there, it's on fire, the woods are on fire, and they end up finding three bodies inside this oven, this cabin that's turned into an oven.
Correct.
And those people are,
Molly, Adam, and Gavin.
and I would imagine, did it take them some time to identify them, or were they able to do that right away?
No, it took them 17 days to identify them. Um, and they had to go through forensic anthropologists. I believe their remains were sent to Santa Cruz, I think.
It was done by DNA.
And it was done by DNA.
Mm,
Um, the reason that they knew they had a murder on their hands was because they found a very, very small piece of Gavin's skull, and it had a perfect bullet hole in it. Um, so, um, yeah, and that's when they knew they had a murder. That it was just, even they said, even to the a layman could tell that it was a bullet hole.
mm.
Um, and that piece of Gavin's skull is still in evidence. We didn't we weren't allowed to lay them to rest until 2 years ago. So
Wow. So 8 years
they
after the fact.
8 years they stayed in evidence.
Wow. So they find these bodies, 17 days to identify them. In the process of those weeks, are they interviewing Nolan? And is that when his story's changing? Or did it take them some time to actually go contact him?
No, what happened was they went, because they of course found out who the house belonged to, and then they went down to Benicia, which is where their home was. So this was in Greenwood, California, in El Dorado County. um, and the cabin was what, 3 hours away?
Yeah.
Was 3 hours away from Benicia. So they sent El Dorado County detectives sent Benicia PD to Molly and Adam's house, to see if anybody was there, because they didn't know who they had in there. So they wanted to see if anybody was there. And they knocked on the door Sunday night. They knocked on the door Sunday night, and Nolan opened the door with a can of beer in his hand.
Mm.
Um,
And that's when he
yeah,
says,
and
I wasn't there.
he said I wasn't there. He was waiting for them to get back and just straight face lied he wasn't there.
How
Um,
did they figure out that he had been there?
um, so Billy, I wasn't allowed in the trial because I testified, so I wasn't allowed in the trial at all. So
Okay.
um, they figured that it kind of, I feel that it kind of started with me when I was also Billy and I were also in Michigan when all of this was happening and um, finding out. And I was talking to detectives on the phone and I kept asking about the vehicles because we knew for a fact that there was one vehicle, the Dodge pickup stayed on the property 100%. Adam he was registering it non-operational because he never wanted it to hit the street because it was a heap. So, you know, it was only good for property. Um, so I started asking them if Molly and Adam's truck, the F-150, was there. And at first they told me that all vehicles were accounted for. And I said, no, if you know, if they're there, the Ford F-150 is going to be there. And then the detective told me, no, there's just a Dodge. And I said, then they're not there. So when they went to Benicia, the Ford F-150 was home. And
Mm.
I had told them that there's just no way that, right?
Yeah, there's no way
Oh,
that that
yeah,
truck would have been home if they weren't home.
yeah.
Right.
And I kept telling them that they needed, because their friends had just lost property in Calaveras County from the fires, and I was saying, go find Clinton, Sherry. You know, they're probably there helping them. I kept thinking, you know, surely this couldn't be happening. At that point, they weren't even telling me that there were remains. Excuse me. They had told me that it was a crime scene, that um, ATF was involved. And I didn't even, to be honest, I didn't even really understand what ATF was.
Right.
Because why would I? I don't deal with ATF.
Right.
So,
Right. So that because the truck was gone, you all put it together that, someone drove that truck away from the house, from the cabin,
yes,
and it
yes.
was Gavin. And then his story
No, it was
changed to,
Nolan.
oh, sorry, yeah,
Nolan.
sorry, it was Nolan.
It's
Th-
okay. We do it.
then the story changes to, okay, I had to do something in self-defense. And did the
Now,
authorities buy that story at all at any point?
that story didn't happen until until we had to have a transfer hearing. So when Nolan was first arrested on October 1st, 2015, he was charged as an adult with murder in the first 3 counts of murder in the first degree.
And how old was
In
he at that time?
16,
16.
he was 16. In I believe it was 2017, it could have been 16, California passed Proposition 57 that said that a juvenile had to go through a transfer hearing to see if they were eligible to be charged as an adult. So
Mhm.
his attorneys put in a
Transfer request.
they put in a transfer request, and so he was allowed to do that. He was allowed to go through a transfer hearing. It wasn't until the actual transfer hearing that we were told by the DA what
New excuse
his
was.
new excuse was
Or
going
his
to
his
be.
defense, right? It was at his defense.
That's what, however, yes, correct. However, his aunt in law, she had sent me messages through Facebook. We were all still all trying to figure this out. She had sent me a Facebook message in March of 2016 and told me that that's what his defense was going to be. So that's kind of a, also, let me just say that the Buchanans and us, we have zero relationship. Um, so Adam's family and my family, we don't have any relationship. But I knew what it was going to be before that. Um, so
Okay.
that's when the courts found out what his actual defense was, and so at that point, then he was tied into it. He
I
had to
see.
stick with that.
And at any point before this year, did he ever confess or admit to doing these horrific crimes?
No.
Not to anyone in law enforcement.
Okay. I want to pause there for a minute and ask what you guys in your minds are going through back when this thing is developing in the fall of 2015? You know, these are your family members, these are your loved ones, your grandson. How do you process all of this?
Um, how, let's see. It it was pure horror. Just horror of trying to understand what had happened to them, betrayal when because we knew we felt strongly right away, and we also had a luncheon with Nolan too, where he spoke to us. Um, we knew quite quickly that Nolan was the one, and there was such betrayal of that, to think that he could do that to his little brother, um and his parents. He called Molly mom. She raised him for 10 years, and um just it was terror and horror. And um how did we process it? I immediately started going into therapy and trying to figure it out. um just doing what the DA wanted us to do. We um it didn't become a I feel it could have become a media circus, and it didn't, because we all just kind of kept, there we had news people knocking on our doors, and we just kept saying no comment, no comment. Didn't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
So how did we get through it? By a lot of strength and perseverance, and um,
Communication.
communication between he and I.
Yeah,
Are you
um
married?
I am. Yeah, I have
yeah,
3 kids.
yeah.
If imagine you're 3,000 miles from home and you get a call like that, and you have to get your wife, who just found out that her baby's been murdered, her baby's been murdered,
Or they were missing at that
and they
point.
were missing at that point. But we had a pretty good idea what was going on,
Right.
at least to a point. And you have to get your wife 3,000 miles across the country back home when you're trying to take care of her and trying to process yourself, put
Right.
yourself in, and that was my shoes
Yeah.
for the first 48 hours.
It was because we were able to get on a plane and get home. um the only reason that we realized, I had called I had called Molly, um because we were in Michigan visiting his family, and Billy had inherited some of his father's guns, and we were trying to figure out how to get him back home properly. Do we
Yeah.
check him? What do we do? So Adam was pretty smart, and so I'd called Molly to see if she would, ask Adam, and it went directly to voicemail. And so that would happen with Molly, would go to directly to voicemail. Um, and then I thought, to heck with you, I'm going to call Adam. And so I called Adam, and it went directly to voicemail. And I was like, that, because Adam typically picked up the phone,
Ran
Hmm.
a business.
because he ran a business. And when he didn't answer, I was like, I don't think so. So then I called the business. I called Buchanan Construction, and his father answered, and I said, Adam? And he said, no. And I said, Howard, because I don't care for Howard. And he said, yes. And I said, is Molly there? And he said, no. And I said, is Adam there? And he said, no. And I'm standing in the middle of a Walmart, and I said, oh, okay. And he said, we have a problem. Molly, Adam, and Gavin are missing, and the cabin is burning. And I instantly hit the floor. I hit my knees in the middle of Walmart, in the middle of podunk nowhere. Um, and I was just balled in a corner, just in a ball. Um, and Billy came, and I kept saying to Howard, send me your phone number. We need to know what's going on. And he said, oh no, we're going to wait to hear from El Dorado County Sheriff. And I'm like, well, wait, what are you talking about? We can't wait. Um, Billy got me up on my feet, and I said, I have to call my big sister, because she kind of takes, she's my big sister.
Yeah.
Um, he sent me outside because he had to purchase some stuff, and he had his mom with dementia who didn't know where she was.
Oh
So
man.
he's, so I walked out and called my sister. And so that's how we found out everything was going on. Our, my daughter, and I'm going to say, my kids are our kids, so he's helped raise my kids. We don't do step kids. So our daughter Rachel, my sister, my ex-husband, and a niece, they did end up going up to the crime scene that day. And Rachel, our daughter, was the one who was told, she was told to prepare her family for a tragedy of epic proportion and to rally the troops,
Oh
and
my
that there were
gosh.
remains.
Oh my word.
So
Whew. So they charge him as an adult, and then um it goes to the trial. What tell me about I was reading that there was some evidence about the construction business falling on hard times. Did that come into play in the trial?
did it come into play in the trial?
Very little. It was some stuff that Nolan had brought up, the
Right.
defense team had brought up.
That maybe like ex-workers might retaliate against the family because they got laid off or something. Was that kind of part of the defense?
They brought it up, but it didn't have wheels.
I don't think that was part of the trial,
Okay.
per se. Was it part of the investigation? Surely. Um, Also, we met with Nolan, because this happened early in the early morning hours of Sunday, the 13th. We found out the 14th, which was a Monday. We flew home the 15th. So the Wednesday after everything happened, we met with Nolan at a little pizza parlor in town, and he said to us, as we were asking him what's going to happen, we don't know what's going on, we don't know what's going to happen. He was very stoic to begin with, but Nolan was a stoic kid anyway. But he looked at us, and I said, what's going to happen with the business? And he said, I am no longer an heir, I am an owner. My father put that business in mine and my brother's name, and they're not here, so now it's mine.
Hmm.
And just, I said, do you think anybody got out? Nolan, do you think anybody got out? And he looked away and he said, probably not.
And so
Just
he wasn't emotional at all.
at all,
At all.
at
None.
all, nothing. Because that's and he had called for that meeting. He was the one who asked his step grandmother to call me to meet up. And I thought we were going to meet and just, blubber all over the place. And when we walked out of there, it was like, you little not kind words.
SOP.
Right.
um, we knew he had done it. That's the day that we actually knew he had done it. So was back to your question, was the worker thing that was looked into in the very beginning, also because they found Molly's purse and the gun. So Molly's purse with identification was found zero point 0.7 miles from the construction company.
Oh,
So, and he had stashed that.
okay. So it goes to trial. Susan, why did they call you as a witness?
I was called as a witness by the prosecution and by the defense. So I was called as a witness to um, what I testified to is because I could explain the cabin, and I could explain where everything was on the property and how things were laid out in the cabin. So I was able to do that. I was also called to testify for the luncheon that we sat through
Mm.
with Nolan face to face, being Nolan, and um, and I could testify to um, what I knew of the abuse that Molly. It was more abuse toward Molly that she had gone through. Um, so more of that. I was called to testify for the defense because they were trying to say um, that there was so much abuse in the family, and that to try to say that Adam would have killed Molly, and um, because I had found a letter that that I had written to Molly. Yeah, I'd found a letter that I had written to Molly, um, and there was a time when she had gotten away from Adam, and she had gotten her own place here, and Adam followed me to her little apartment. And he was threatening her outside of her apartment, and I was trying to get Molly away from him, and I had written that, I'm afraid he's going to do something to you and Gavin.
Mm.
Um, and that was just my way of trying to get her away. I wanted to get her away from him. Um, and so I was called to testify that to that. And also that I testified to the fact that Nolan was very much a stoic kid. In so many pictures, you don't see him smile. He wasn't a happy-go-lucky kid ever.
At least not around us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could get him. He could joke around, but not a lot.
So how long was the trial?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Did he take the
3 weeks.
stand?
He did. He did. Um, I have the. I also have the. Not documentation. What do you call them? The
The
court.
transcript?
I have his transcript.
So did you haven't gone back? I guess, did they have cameras in the trial?
No.
Only what would typically be in a courtroom.
Okay, not like media cameras.
There was no media. Yeah.
No media.
There was no media.
And when he testified, I don't know, Billy, were you in the courtroom the day he testified, or what did you all hear about that testimony? What did he say?
Oh, I was there. It just, he was just saying that, with all the abuse, and you have to remember, Adam is 6'2", 210, 215 pounds, big man. And at that time, Nolan was probably 5'6", maybe a buck 35. And he said that he had to wrestle the gun away from his dad to, and then in self-defense shoot his dad, which never would have happened. It's just not physically possible. But it was just one thing after another, and it was so practiced that when the defense was questioning him, he would turn on the tears and turn off the tears, and then turn them back on and turn them back off, and then turn them back on. And so when the defense, finished theirs and the prosecution went, the prosecutor had him so befuddled and so ticked off that when the rebuttal came from the defense and they went down that same road of triggers to make him start crying, he couldn't do it.
Oh, wow.
He was so irritated and so ticked off that he couldn't turn the tears back on again.
But did he
So they
cry
asked him to
during
go
the
to lunch.
initial testimony? He did shed tears?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And then when the prosecution got in and started hammering him on the different things that he had said, and then the defense tried to come back and clean it all up, he couldn't turn the waterworks back on. It just, the real Nolan came out.
Did you guys ever believe his story?
No.
Never.
No. And here's why. Molly and Adam had a very tumultuous relationship, incredibly tumultuous. When it all kind of first started and we're trying to figure out what's going on, did I think that Molly and Adam would have killed each other? Yes. They were getting into hunting and they were going up into the mountains and they would have these horrible fights. So did I think that could have happened? Yes, I did. Did I think for 1 second that either one of them would have ever hurt that little boy?
No.
Absolutely not. There's no way.
No way.
No way that, from what Nolan said, Adam pointed a gun and shot Gavin in the head. No way in hell would Adam have ever done that, nor would Molly.
No.
And that's why we knew, there's just no way that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
They had such a tumultuous relationship, but their love for that little boy was so great. And Adam, Adam and Molly also loved Nolan, unconditionally. He was, he was, for the most part, I feel like he was a good kid. He had a couple struggles in high school, but really he did what he was told, and he did what he was told.
Yeah.
So no, we never believed him that, when he came up with the defense,
Right.
that he did.
And based on news reports, prosecutors showed that he had planned it before they even left for the trip.
Yes. Yes.
So he's found guilty. What was that like when the verdict came down for you guys?
Uh, well, relief is a huge word because it was such a relief because you never know. One juror can change the whole realm of things, and he was a 16-year-old kid, and somebody could have felt sorry for him, and um, just that it was just such a relief that it was over, and then um, one of the things Billy said um, when we left the courthouse that day is, "What are we going to talk about now? What are
Mm.
we going to talk about now?" Um, and and here we are today, almost 10 years later, and we're still talking about it. Um,
Is it because it had been such a massive part of your life? It's all you were talking about?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
You got
because
to, well, the way I looked at it when the verdict came out, the first thing I did was one, I felt this weight just drop off of me. And I looked at the
mm,
jurors and patted my chest and said, thank you.
Mm.
And then we were in Lake Tahoe because that's where the trial was in South Lake Tahoe. And we went to dinner that night, little uh, Irish pub across the street. She and I went to have dinner and a celebratory cocktail. And that's when I told her, I said, well, what do we talk about now?
Mm.
This is all we've talked about for nearly 3.5 years, every single day. And now that this is basically over, what do we talk about now?
and the what ifs, and the fact that we were able to get him charged as an adult. That was so huge. Otherwise, because he's 25, maybe he's 26 now. Had he been able to be charged as a juvenile, he'd be out by now. He would be
Wow.
out by now.
Wow.
Whether he was a model prisoner or not, he would have only had to stay until he was 25 years
25
old.
years old.
As it stands, he has an opportunity for parole in 2039.
Yeah.
Um,
So it was not a life sentence. He is eligible for parole in about
because
14 years.
yeah,
Yes.
because he was a juvenile, and that's pretty much across the. I think that's across the nation there were. I think it's the Miller versus the state of Alabama or something, that it's cruel and unusual punishment to give a juvenile or a youth offender a life without parole sentence, and it could have happened. Um, but I think the judge was very, very smart. I think she was just a brilliant judge, knowing that this gave him less opportunity for appeals, um, to keep this dragging out.
Right.
Um, and she did say in her um, in the court transcripts, she said when she was talking to us that this case was one that, of all the cases, this one affected her the most,
Mm.
um, and um, and that if he were an adult when it happened, that this would have been a death penalty trial. Um,
Right.
so
Wow.
um, and I have those transcripts. I have Judge Kingsbury's, Nolan's, mine, his grandfather Buchanan, um, and then his step grandmother Susan Buchanan. I have those um,
Transcript.
transcripts.
Yeah. So he was convicted in 2018, and that's not the end of the story. You all have kept in touch with him, right? Or at least have
No,
recently.
no recent. We did not. We have until March 3rd. We had not spoken to Nolan since the day we met him for lunch at the
Oh,
pizza
wow.
parlor.
That was it. Okay, thank you for correcting that. So
Yeah,
you met right after the crimes were committed in 2015. And
Right.
then
correct.
you go through all of this for a decade. So tell me what led to March 3rd.
So from the very, very beginning of this, um, I mentioned the word betrayal. So I felt really, really betrayed because I love Nolan. And I can say that I still love Nolan. It's difficult, but I do. Um, I have told Billy from the very, very beginning that I was going to go see this kid and now this man. Before I died, I was going to go see him. And Billy was adamant he didn't want anything to do with him. Nothing. He was, you know, couldn't get past his anger. And then it started. I would check up on him. I would see where he was, where he was imprisoned is the only word I can think of, housed, where he's housed.
Yeah.
And then he moved to a prison near Chowchilla, California. And I started looking on CDCR just to check, and I saw this thing called the Victim Offender Dialogue. And so what that is it's where we have facilitators, and these facilitators speak to me or the victim, and it became Billy and I speak to us. They go and they check with Nolan, or the offender. The offender has to be willing to do it. He has to be eligible to do it. Um, he has to understand that it won't do anything for his parole to meet with us. And so I started meeting with them, that I just wanted answers. And at one point, because he wasn't happy about it, and I had said, no, 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 I'm not going to do it. And one of the reasons, that he wasn't happy is that he's just going to keep lying to us. At that point, he's just going to keep lying. We're never going to find out the truth. And so when I told the facilitator that, I said, I can't go through with this. I can't go sit across from this guy and have him blow sunshine up my behind and and listen to his lies anymore. And she said, oh, he hasn't admitted what he did. And I said, no, as far as I know. So she said, oh no, we would not put you through this unless he's going to come clean. And I said, he's not going to do it anyway. So that's when I talked to Billy, and I said, the only way that they'll allow this to happen is if Nolan admits what he did. And I said, will you go with me then? And he said, yeah, because it's not going to happen. I'll go with you.
Yeah.
So on September 13th, 9 years to the day that everything happened, the facilitators went down to Chowchilla and met with Nolan. We found out, because that was on a Friday. We talked to them on Monday, and I was able to ask a question of Nolan, and I asked, are you ready to take responsibility for the deaths of Molly, Adam, and Gavin? And when we talked to the facilitator on that Monday, she said that Nolan said yes, he was taking responsibility for the murders. And to say, literally it knocked us back in our seats, because we're sitting in the same spot that we were both just thrown back like it was this insane blast. And I had to get up, because I have two dogs who are my babies. I had to get up, and I just felt like I had to scream. It was just, everything was inside, and Billy was sitting here and he was starting to cry. And I walked out of the room for a minute, and I came back in, and I told the facilitator, I'm so sorry. I feel like I have to scream. And she said, we're gonna turn down our volume. She said, grab a pillow or something, let it out. And I just grabbed a pillow and shoved it in my face, and I screamed and screamed and screamed. To hear that he finally admitted it just blew both of our minds. We were just stunned.
I cannot
And so
imagine.
now,
I cannot imagine that moment. And is that when you said, okay, now that he's ready to admit, let's go?
yes,
Yes.
we both said, let's go. And then it took months. This process took about a year of different meetings with them. And then it took a few more months, and then the date was set, and away we went.
So March 3rd of this year, 2025, describe to me going into that prison. Are you all put in a room and then he walks in, or do you walk in and he's waiting for you? Walk me through that.
We had the choice. And I wanted him to come into the room for us. When Rebecca was the facilitator in charge, she said, Susie, he's coming in. And I stood up from my seat, and I walked, and he came walking in the door, and I just opened my arms and I hugged him.
Mm.
I know, crazy.
Had you planned to do that?
Yes, I knew I did. Um, that I had planned to do that. Billy was absolutely not. He didn't want anything to do with him. And once I opened my arms and hugged him, um, and Nolan hugged me back too. Um, then Billy hugged him. So
What
um,
changed your
I
mind,
asked.
Billy?
Not really sure. It was a spur of the moment thing. And I wanted him to know that I appreciated him being honest and accepting responsibility and maybe becoming part of a man. And I wanted to reward him for that part of it.
Yeah.
I think had a little bit to do with it. Uh, Throughout the time that we were sitting with him, I don't think there was any doubt what my thoughts and feelings were towards him for what he did.
Was
I
he was he open from
There
the
was no
get-go?
forgiveness. Let's put it that way.
You said, I'm sorry, you said what?
There was no
No
forgiveness.
forgiveness.
No, I'll never forgive him for what he did.
Were you all able to be, you mentioned that there was no confusion or misrepresentation of how you felt. Were you able to convey to him everything that was on your mind and just unload, or did you kind of let him talk?
We kind of let him do the talking. We would ask questions and kind of let him do the talking as far as, what led up to that moment. And even some of the stuff he admitted to what he did, he never admitted to how he did most of those things because I called it, and this is probably being generous, I called it 75-25. 25% of it was probably true, or at least what he's brought up in his mind to live with what he did. The other 75% was BS.
Oh, wow, that much, huh?
Yeah, because again, everything that he said and everything that he did, and I even said this to the facilitators, was so polished. It's like he spent all these years standing in front of a mirror perfecting what he was going to say
Mm.
if asked. That's what it seemed like to me. I told the facilitators that I'm not wholeheartedly sure that I agree with those facilitators on what and how they do what they do. I think they're more sided with the inmate than the victims,
Mm.
in my personal opinion. And I told them that too.
Hmm.
And they weren't supposed to be siding with anybody, but it did, you know, one of the things about where he is, it's it's Valley State Prison in California. It's Valley State Prison and San Quentin Prison. You've heard of San Quentin, I'm sure.
Right.
Um, they're both going on the California model, which is okay. Billy's going to get something to drink.
No
Um,
worries.
which is more on the rehabilitation side. They're working more toward rehabilitating these inmates than the hardcore punishment. So, um, they're very in tune to trying to get him rehabilitated. So,
And
um,
that's how, as Billy said, it might appear that they're more on their side versus the victim side.
right, um, and in that, Rebecca has, she has checked in with me periodically just to see how we're doing, and I mean, they're very nice people. So,
Right.
um, but um, but yeah, after I hugged Nolan, and he was a 16-year-old boy. He didn't have any tattoos, but he had tattoos on his arm, and I asked him. He had, I said, "Tell me about your tattoos," and he had 3 roses on his hand so that he can always remember them. Um, so uh, I, there's a little bit of bitterness for me, a lot. a lot. Um,
Right. What did he say? Why did he say he did it? What was his story? The abuse?
he blamed it on Molly.
Mm.
He blames it on Molly. He, let me, I want to pull some notes that I had from, um, I sat down and I asked him if he was willing to take responsibility for it. He said yes. Um, I said, did you kill Adam? He said yes. I said, did you kill Molly? He said yes. I said, did you kill Gavin? He said yes. And I said, did you know the weekend before was Gavin's 8th birthday? We were all up at the cabin. I said, did you know the weekend before that was going to be the last time I ever saw them? And he said no. So he's still denying that he had it planned. He's trying to put it off that it was, kind of a spur of the moment thing, that I don't believe. We don't believe for 1 second. He said um, that one of his greatest fears in life was his father, and he was always afraid of disappointing him or Adam going off because Adam had a temper, and um, so his greatest fear was his dad. And so um, months before this had gone on, he had begun sneaking out at night. And he had never felt freedom like that. And it was like a high. He just kept sneaking out. Then he started breaking into cars. And so he said that he had broken into a nurse's car, quote unquote, and he had stolen a bunch of pens. Um, and so Molly, the weekend before the weekend before the murders, Nolan had also hurt his ankles. He and I were racing around on the dirt bikes, and he had fallen and hurt his ankles. Molly and Rachel had run to a store to get some ace bandages and things. Molly had told Rachel that she found EpiPens and a bunch of change in Nolan's drawers at home, and that she didn't want to tell Adam because she didn't want to ruin Gavin's birthday, but that she would be telling Adam. So
Um,
Nolan said he had broken into this nurse's car, had stolen these pens. He said that when Molly found them, he she had texted him and said, what the heck is this? She texted him a picture of it. What the heck is this? Are you dealing drugs? What are you doing? And he was like, no, 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 it's not what you think. It's not what you think. And she told him, I'm not going to tell your dad, because I don't want it to ruin Gavin's birthday, but we're going to talk about it next week. Well, we
mm,
went through Gavin's birthday. The next week came and went. He, he said that anytime he and Molly would have any kind of disagreement, she would say, you better knock it off or I'm going to tell your dad. And he said he was already spiraling at that point. And so they went to the cabin that weekend, and he and Molly got into some kind of disagreement on the porch of the cabin. And she said, that's it, come Monday morning, I'm setting all this crap on your dad's lap and we're going to talk about it. And Nolan was saying, please don't. Adam came around the corner and said, what are you talking about? And Molly said, you don't know half of what's going on in this family and I'm sick and tired of it. And Nolan said, and that's when I knew Molly had to die.
mm.
So
Those were his words.
that's when I knew Molly had to die. But he couldn't just kill Molly, because if he killed Molly, then Gavin would, literally, this is what he's telling us. Couldn't kill Molly because then Gavin wouldn't be he would be without a mother, and that would just be, horrific. And so, he's going to have to kill Gavin too. And then Adam would never forgive him, surely. So, I mean, he'd just have to kill them all.
Oh
What he
my.
told us.
Yeah.
Well, so how did you take all that in? I mean, how did you process it, knowing, as you said, that 75% of it was BS and 25% of it was true, and probably you had to leave and sort through it in your mind. But was the hope of what you hoped would come from it? Did you obtain that by the time it came time to go?
By the time it came time to go, yes, yes, um, I did. Because I knew he was a liar, because there were things that he lied about in in our meeting with him down there. I knew, um, because he said that he still holds true to standing back from Gavin and shooting Gavin, and while Gavin lay sleeping. But it would have been a beveled and oval hole in Gavin's skull. He said, "Oh, I must have hit him. I hit him behind the ear, which is where he hit him." Um, and so, how did I'm kind of jumping a little bit, and I apologize.
It's okay.
Um, how did I process this? Uh, we just kind of let him keep talking. First of all, um, took a deep breath, um, and yeah, and when it was all said and done, one of my thoughts was, oh, it's Nolan. I should be helping to take care of Nolan. So it was hard to leave. But the next morning I woke up and I realized that he's right where he needs to be.
Mm.
He's so right where he needs to be. He's still not okay in his head. He's absolutely not okay in his head. He told us how it happened, how
His version.
his version of how it happened when they came home that night. Um, he said that he he and Gavin stayed up till about 10 o'clock playing playing cards, and then he put Gavin to bed at 10 o'clock. Um, and he was going to kill him when Gavin fell asleep, but he couldn't do it. He paced back and forth in this cabin, couldn't do it. Then he laid down with the gun and went to sleep. And because Molly and Adam had gone out to the bar,
Hmm.
and they were coming in about a quarter after 1. And as the lights came and illuminated the cabin, it woke him up. And he got up and knew he had to do it then. Paced back and forth, paced back and forth. Um, and then he finally got up the nerve and he held the gun toward Gavin, standing near the end of his bed, held it toward him and shot him. Um, and he said they must not have heard the shot, um, because they didn't come running in. So they parked and came in, and as I said, there was no sheetrock. There was just framed walls. But I guess Adam had put up a water heater, and so Nolan went in what would have been the bedroom, and he hid behind the water heater. And when Adam came into that room, um, Adam kind of ran into him and held Nolan back like this. And he
Hmm.
did this. He said, "I put the gun under my dad's chin and I shot." And it was a 22 rifle. He said he shot.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
Molly heard it. And so Molly came running in and she ran into him and he shoved her back and she landed on building materials that were in up against the wall,
In the cabin.
and
Hmm.
he shot her, and shot her in the thigh. And my thing was, did she say anything? Because that was one of the things I've always wondered. Did they say anything? Did she, I'm a mom. Did she call out for me? You know, did she say anything? And he said no, that he felt they were both just stunned. Um, and then he said she stood up and he said, and I quote, he held the gun at his hip and he racked it back and just kept racking it back, shooting her. He shot her 8 times.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and she just kept screaming and screaming. And he realized later that he was screaming at the same time. And she fell to the floor finally. My daughter was a fighter, by the way. She was a scrapper. And she finally fell and she was still screaming. And he went up to her and he put the gun to her head, shot her in the head, and she stopped screaming. So,
Oh my gosh.
how I don't know how we process this. I honestly don't know because you know I part of me feels like it was a lot of the strength that came from sitting across from him in the pizza
Which,
parlor that day.
right.
Just knowing that we just had to keep him talking, and I just needed him to keep talking. We sat for him for 6 hours. We were
Mm.
there for 6 hours with him. Um, while he told this story, he was very matter of fact.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
he just was very, very matter of fact. Um, he said that he did go over to Gavin because he heard Gavin gurgling, and that was part of his testimony as well. That he held Gavin while Gavin died, um, and also they had found his clothes that he wore that night, and there was no blood on them. And so he said the reason there was no blood, he said, I'm going to be graphic, but there was like this balloon thing that came out of Gavin's head that was holding blood. I kid you not. That's what he told us. I've never heard of anything
Oh my.
um, like that. And then he held Gavin until he died. And then he went into Adam and closed Adam's eyes and said, I'm sorry it had to be like this. And then he walked out, stepped over Molly, um, and called to Hunter, the dog, because the dog was there. Hunter was hiding under Gavin's cot, and Hunter came crawling out on his belly. And went outside with Nolan. He said he grabbed Molly's purse and the gun because he knew the truck keys would be in the purse. So he grabbed Molly's purse and the gun, got Hunter, went out, opened the car door to the truck. The what do you call that cab light?
Cargo light.
The cargo light illuminated the back of the truck, and that's when he saw the gas cans and decided to burn them up. So he went in and he doused them all with gasoline all around the cabin, and he ran a trail out the cabin. He found a lighter in Molly's purse, tried to light a leaf to get it to light, and it didn't work. So he lit another one and it worked, and he watched it snake up. And he said, and when it hit the inside of the cabin, he said it whoosh, and imploded. Everything, he said, just blew. And he got in the truck and drove home.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
And
gosh.
there's video evidence of that.
There's video evidence of him. They didn't know it was him driving home, but
Mm.
so
So have you talked to him since?
no,
Do you
no,
want to?
no. I can't. I can't. Um, no, I don't. Because this was his one chance to come clean with us, and he didn't come clean, and he's delusional about things that happen afterwards that I just know he's delusional about. Saying that um Adam Adam was kind of the head of his family because his father had left him when he
Mhm.
was his father ran off with the woman he ultimately married. So Adam, being the oldest brother, took over for the family. Um, Nolan said when this happened with Adam, that the family, his grandfather and his uncles, all decided that Nolan would have to be the head of the family. Um, and they took him around to different family members right after everything happened so that he could comfort them and let them know everything was going to be okay. And that he was a pillar of strength, and he'd make sure everybody was okay. And when I asked him, what family members, Nolan? Oh, I don't remember, but they took me around to family members. And it's like, you're
Mm.
such a liar. And still to this day, he's delusional that, he's delusional in saying that I believe that Molly snitching him off because Molly was going to rat him out. Um, I believe that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I believe wholeheartedly what El Dorado County District Attorneys and the investigators came up with, that he wanted the business. He had no idea that the business was in trouble. He thought that the house in Benicia was bought and paid for, and he could just take everything over. As a 16-year-old kid, he
Yeah.
thought this, not realizing, because I even asked him, do you plan to, when we met for lunch that day, I said, are you going to get emancipated? And he said, what's that? He didn't
Mm.
even know that he couldn't just step into this role.
Right.
Um, and he chastised his grandfather when his grandfather told him that they had to sell everything off, and told him, I had you take care of this because it's going to be mine someday. We asked him, Nolan, did you really think you were going to get away with this? And he said, yeah, he
Mm.
did.
Jeez. So you've got the one grandson in prison at least till 2038. And then you have the other one who's no longer here, Gavin. And I want you to talk a little bit about the foundation that you guys have started in his
Mhm.
memory, right?
Yes, it is in his memory. So when Gavin was 5 and 6 years old, when he was 5 years old, he went to a pet store in Benicia, and this pet store does law enforcement canine fundraisers every year. And he went, there was uh, Sergeant Kurt Keffer was out there with his canine Bach, and Gavin told Molly, I want to donate. I want to donate. And so they took him home and he went and broke open his piggy bank. Was there a full $100 in there? Probably not. But he broke open his piggy bank, got into it. And Adam traded him everything in his piggy bank for a crisp $100 bill that he proudly went back into the store and said, I want this to go to that dog out there. Well, Bach already had a canine vest. And so Cover Your Canine was the foundation that was doing that work that day, and the news crews ended up getting a hold of this, and so Gavin was able to go to Alameda where they were doing canine trials, and he was able to help donate a vest to Canine Eddie of the not Alameda.
East Palo Alto.
East Palo Alto.
Police
So
Department.
he was able to do that. And he was pretty proud of himself. We were all so proud of him. Like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
But, that wasn't good enough for Gavin. And he wanted to donate to the canine in his hometown. And so he started saving his money again and saved his tooth fairy money and his chore money and all of those things. And he traded it into his dad, and they went back and gave the store another $100 bill. And so he was able
Next year.
No, it was within a few months, because he did August.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that August, and then it was in January. So he donated again, and he was able to present Atos a vest, and he was just super proud of himself, and he loved those canines. And so when everything happened, my family, 'cause it wasn't me, believe me, I was in no condition. My family decided that we needed to start a foundation called the Gavin Buchanan Memorial Foundation, in his honor and in his memory. And we got our 501c3 a couple days after Nolan was arrested, I believe it was. And so we have since, we do fundraisers. We raised a couple $100,000, and we've donated quite a bit to Pocatello. My sister lives up there, so she donates to Pocatello, to their vests, and a lot to Indiana, nationwide. We've done fundraisers in Washington and Pocatello, here in Vacaville, California, Texas. So
Nevada.
yeah,
Yeah,
Nevada.
that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
You're able to do that in his honor, and such a tragic story, but that is, one of the positive things that's come of it. Is there anything that you guys want to add?
I don't know. Probably not. Um, yes, in thinking back, you asked how we got through everything.
Mhm.
Doing Gavin's foundation has been a tremendous help. It was able, we were able to put something positive into this horrible, horrible situation. And Gavin's with us all the time. And the DA told us that she felt that that little piece of skull that was left behind in all that rubble, she felt that that was Gavin's way of saying, hey, he just was a helper. He was an amazing little boy. And for his big brother to do this, you know it's hard to say, that's the worst of it, because there is no worst of it. It's all horrific.
Yeah.
But to think that, um, Molly and Adam were adults, and like I said, Molly fought. I know she fought. Adam didn't stand a chance because he was ambushed. Gavin was an innocent little boy.
Yeah.
He was just an innocent little boy who, our other grandson is, in Navy boot camp right now, and Gavin he'll be turning 18 in September, and he would have graduated high school. So the things that child missed out on because of this maniac.
Man.
He's a madman. Nolan is a madman.
He definitely lives in a alternative reality.
Yeah. Well, Billy and Susie, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your story. Again, this is something I had not heard of until, recently, and hopefully, it can reach other people out there and maybe prevent something like this from happening, or at least, give new insight onto these horrible tragedies.
That's what we've always said. I've always said, if us telling our story saves one family, one person, it's more than worth it.
And also, because it's true that that husbands and wives often don't survive these kind of horrors. They, you know, it tested us a lot, and you can do it. It's wasn't easy, but communication and you know, f- there are that's kind of a message, I think that we've wanted to get out too. Like, it can happen. You can stay together, and um, but I mean, if not, then that's understandable too.
Yeah, because you see all the stories of people that have lost children or whatever, and the marriage ultimately goes south, and you don't deal with the root problem. And the root problem is that you did lose loved ones. We lost loved ones.
We lost four.
We lost four.
Yeah.
Molly, Adam, and Gavin, and then we lost Nolan as well.
Right.
So you lose a whole family.
Yeah.
And you talk, and I think it's harder for men because we're supposed to be the strong ones, and we're not supposed to talk about our feelings. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, I'm sure.
Right.
And it was hard for me.
Yeah.
To open up to her.
Well, and he was just so he was so worried about me. If not for him, he's been my rock. He's picked me up slobbering and crying and screaming from the floor. You just I mean, I don't have to tell you, you work with true crime all the time. So uh that's a question. Has that always been your passion, or did you just happen to fall into this with where's your kids, Lori?
Yeah. I've always been interested in it, but I've been doing news for almost 20 years. It's been just whatever, car crashes or political stuff or whatever was happening that day. But ever since Daybell, I've actually really become interested in it more and more. And I didn't think I'd ever be one of those, true crime people, but I've got the podcasts now, and I'm fascinated though by hearing your stories, the stories of victims and their families and how they get through it and why they decide to go talk to the man in prison who killed their family. I mean, that stuff to me is the really interesting stuff. So I was really thrilled when you reached out, and can't thank you enough.